Za'Darius Smith has been holding out hope to land back in Detroit. And as of late, there's been some conversation as to Za'Darius Smith potentially ending up in Chicago, with recent information actually coming to light yesterday or today, stating that Za'Darius Smith was being hotly pursued by the Chicago Bears and Ben Johnson. So I wanted to dig into this a little bit because, as we know, Za'Darius Smith has said nothing but wanting to come back to Detroit. And matter of fact, his quote just a few days ago was, "Hopefully I can get back to Detroit." And so reaching out to one of the Bears writers and asking for comment, simply stated that if the former Packers, Vikings, and Lions edge rusher Za'Darius Smith wants to complete his NFC North sweep and be part of the Bears edge rotation, it wasn't showing when he made an appearance at the BET Awards. So for that, it tells me that Za'Darius Smith is not looking to pursue a relationship with the Chicago Bears. He wants to pursue a ring. And we know that because he said as much. Matter of fact, he told Tyler Dragon of USA Today Sports, he says, quote, "We both know where I want to be," end quote, and continued to say, "Hopefully I can get back to Detroit because the coaching staff and everybody in the front office are great. When I'm there, I feel like a leader, and I can influence the young guys and do great things. Hopefully I can get back to Detroit where I want to be." Furthermore, he also said that he only has one thing on his mind. He's accomplished pretty much everything that he set out to in the NFL besides a few things. Number one was obviously winning a championship. But here's another quote recently by Za'Darius Smith. "I'm going into year 11. As a veteran, a championship is the only thing that I'm missing," end quote. Now, he went on to also say, I did the sacks, All-Pro, Pro Bowl. So it's really just me getting a ring now and winning a championship. So my question to you in the comments below would be, are the Chicago Bears a championship contending football team? I don't think so. And many don't think so either. So why would Za'Darius Smith want to go to Chicago where there is no competition for an immediate Super Bowl? They have a new head coach. They have a second-year quarterback. They have a hodgepodge of offensive and defensive players that Ryan Poles has brought in via free agency. They just started to draft, and the team hasn't been winning football games. It doesn't make sense. Z is not chasing money. If he was chasing money, he would have been signed by now. Matter of fact, the reason why he was let go by the Detroit Lions is because the Lions wanted to save some money as the cap escalated to almost $16 million for Za'Darius Smith just to play in 2025. It would have been about $11 million this year and about $5 million next year with Z off of the roster in 2026. So now that brings me back to the main point of the video. Who is saying that Za'Darius Smith wants to end up in Chicago? Why are they saying that Za'Darius Smith wants to end up in Chicago? I think that both of us know a lot of that is just clickbait, and it gets tiring that we continue to put Lions fans in this situation. But it's very clear that Za'Darius Smith feels like a leader in Detroit. He was walking through the BET Awards with his girlfriend, and quite simply was asked, when is he going to sign in Detroit? And he said very soon. So I'm expecting nothing other than Za'Darius Smith to end up back in Motown. From the very early parts of this offseason, I speculated that Za'Darius Smith would have been a great compliment to Aiden Hutchinson on the other side, if for nothing more than a very, very good depth piece with the guys that, the Lions are bringing back in. But after the offseason, I think the writing was on the wall that it just wasn't going to work out at that kind of money for the Detroit Lions. But bringing him back, I never expected that it was going to happen now or before training camp. I figured if Za'Darius Smith was going to be back in town, that it would either be right before training camp is about to kick off or after training camp when potentially there could be some injuries. And if that is the case, expect him to be back. Why would Za'Darius Smith need to sign with anybody right now? If he wants a ring, The smartest thing for Za'Darius Smith to do is to sit and wait until after the trade deadline, when a team is definitely needing a player to help complement their defensive line if they do suffer some injuries, which is exactly what I'm expecting Za'Darius Smith to be waiting for right now. We've heard from Brad Holmes recently where he stated that they are in communication with his agent and kind of left it in a space where if there's any movement with Za'Darius Smith, if he is, potentially going to sign with another team, to let us know, us being Brad Holmes, the Detroit Lions organization, and at that point they would have to reassess the situation and make a decision. But as of recent, we haven't heard anything. There hasn't been any more communication from the Lions front office, and we don't expect there to be any. They're about ready to ramp up for training camp here in just about 3-4 weeks, and they're going to get through it, and they're going to figure out who's going to stay and who's not by the end of August. And when that happens, Za'Darius Smith could be back on this roster, potentially. But again, I'm going to point back to the fact that I think that Za'Darius is going to wait as long as he can. There's no need to put the mileage on the body when he can put all of that towards, a late run at the end of the season into the Super Bowl. A couple of more highlights here. Za'Darius Smith wanting to be back in Detroit is no secret. Here's the problems with the Bears that I want to outline. The Bears do have a need. They absolutely have a need at the edge rusher position. I don't think that that's a secret. And let me try to point out a few things here to maybe try to wrap this up in a bow for you guys to help you understand that Z is not going to Chicago. One, the Bears have already spent $48 million over 3 years to acquire Deo Odeyingbo for this season and future seasons. And he will be a starting edge rusher. He's the third highest total spent in free agency for any edge player in this free agent period was spent on Deo. They also committed $98 million over 4 years to Montez Sweat. So both of those positions are fairly wrapped up right now. Paying Za'Darius $10, $11, $12, $15 million a year doesn't really fit in the Bears organization right now, at least from the perspective that they've already spent a ton of money in that position or on that position. Smith would kind of rate near the top of available free agents. Matter of fact, he'd probably be at the top of available free agents that would cost quite a bit of money. He just recently played on a 2-year, $23 million deal, having that end in Detroit. Like I said, they saved about $5.7 million from letting him go. There's no dead money accrued by the Detroit Lions. But the Lions only got 4 sacks in 8 games out of Smith. He had 9 sacks last season as a whole, and 5.5 the year before that, and the year before that he had 10. So it's not like that type of production can't be replaced. If you're telling me that there's not another defensive end or another player on the Lions defense that can't produce 9 sacks this season, I think that between a few guys on this team, they will and they can. And definitely to produce, 5.5, 6, that will be done by somebody on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. I do think having Za'Darius would be good for insurance policy, but keeping him kind of tucked off to the side and ready when you're ready, I think is the better plan. Now, back to the Bears. The need at the position is obvious, considering that their third and their fourth edge rushers are 5th-round picks. Now, they brought in Austin Booker, who was high on a lot of out of your minds, coming out of the draft for, ending up in Detroit. Didn't happen, thankfully. And then they also had the 4th-year player in Dominique Robinson. Now, Booker had 1.5 sacks last year in his rookie year. Robinson had 2 sacks in 3 seasons. So not great, right? So the need is there. But the problem, again, it lies with the Bears' salary cap. Ryan Poles has spent a boatload of money. He's left the Bears in a very sticky situation. Situationally, I don't think it fits for the Bears. They have $14.7 million left under the cap this season. They still have to get through cuts. They still have to have that rainy day fund for injuries and probably some money left over for that trade deadline. How is Za'Darius Smith going to fit into that? A 1-year deal for Za'Darius Smith is likely to garner at least $7 to $9 million a year. the Bears would be left with about $5 million. That's just not enough to operate a football team. Now, furthermore, Ben Johnson was very excited about a couple of football players during OTAs this spring. One of them, per Johnson, was Dominique Robinson. Had a very quick first step. And according to Ben Johnson, he says he looks the part for sure. As we know, O-line and D-line play, it's hard to really gauge too much without pads, speaking of, the spring OTAs. But he does have a quick first step off the ball, and he lined up on our left tackles quite a bit here over the last few weeks, and you could tell that he got the edge on him a few times. So, hey, if they've got a guy, they've got a guy. And again, I think that points to the same reason that I've been explaining, or the same thing that I've been explaining in this video, is Za'Darius Smith is not going to end up in Chicago. If anything, he's going to end up back in Detroit, hopefully here by the trade deadline, sometime around week 11 or 12, should the Lions need him. We're hoping the Lions stay healthy, but I too would like to see Za'Darius Smith back in the Honolulu Blue. That's it for this. You guys take care. Go One Pride. Go Detroit Lions. Za'Darius Smith's not going to the Bears. F the Bears. All day and twice on Sunday. We'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.